What's going on, guys? Vulkan here, and today we are back in last Epoch for their massive Eternal Legends update. So this dropped last week, and this brought some brand new stuff. It brought a first of its kind dungeon, the Eternity Cache, where you can craft your very own legendary items. It brought some brand new druid forms like the Werebear, the Swarm Blade, and the Spriggan. And last but not least, it did bring some brand new models for the Mage and the Acolyte, plus a ton of new visuals for a variety of weapons. Oh yeah, and we have a massive crafting overhaul. So if you hated the crafting system of old with kind of the random fractures and things like that, that system is gone. A new system is here. We have tons to talk about, so let's go ahead and let's get into it. So first up, I want to talk about the dungeon and the legendary system because this seemed to be the most talked about feature coming with this patch, followed shortly by the crafting changes, but this was definitely the spotlight feature. So the dungeon is called the Temporal Sanctum, and it has you squaring off against a chronomancer named Jolra. Jolra's not a huge fan of you, not a huge fan of the Epoch or the Eternity Cache, really just hates a lot of things, but you're going to be squaring off against her. So this dungeon is a pretty unique experience, but before you can even attempt it, you need a key. These are called Temporal Sanctum keys. Makes a lot of sense. And you can find these out during your monolith runs. They're totally random, so don't think you can target farm them or anything like that. They are totally random. I was getting one about every 10 to 15 maps. Sometimes you're really lucky and you'll get multiple in a map. So use that kind of as a gauge if you want to. Just know every 10 or so you should be getting a key. Now, once you have a key, head out to the Ruined Coast in the Ruined Era. And there you're going to find an entrance to the dungeon along with a fast travel point, so you can easily come back if you need to. Now, once you use the key on the door, that key is gone. And if you die or leave that dungeon, that key is gone and you cannot return. So once you use the key, you get to choose from 4 difficulties. These start at level 55 and they go all the way up to 90. Now each one is going to increase your rewards, but also increase the monster damage and the monster health because you can't have nice things without having challenges. Oh, and on top of this, you have to beat the previous one before you can progress. So you have to beat 55 before you can attempt the next one, so on and so forth, all the way up until 90. So here you see me in the level 55 dungeon, just warpathing all over the place. Now, once you're in, this dungeon does have a pretty neat feature. You get to press D on your keyboard to flip between the Divine Era and the Ruined Era. Now, this is incredibly important because you will need to flip eras in order to make it past some gates, access some of the doors in order to go deeper into Temporal Sanctum, and also deal with some deadly attacks. Wink, wink, keep that in mind. So, no spoilers, but I think because it's a really fun battle, the Jolra fight is a great time. I'm not going to talk to you guys about it or give away any mechanics or anything like that. So just be aware that you need to be on your toes for quite a few things. There are some little things to kind of remember here and there in order to beat her because she does have some insta-death mechanics. So think laterally and kind of get through those. Now, once she dies, you do get to access the Eternity Cache. Now, this is the chest where you get to create legendaries. So overall, this is an interesting system. So you need a unique with legendary potential. Not every unique has legendary potential. So you'll see it. It's up near the top of the tooltip and it says legendary potential. And you need an exalted item of the same type with 4 affixes. So that means if you go in there and you're trying to make a legendary, axe, you need to have an exalted axe. You can't take an exalted staff or anything like that and throw it in there. That will not work. Now you need to put them both into the cache, press D to change eras, and then suddenly you have your very own legendary item. Now you can only do this once per run, but still it is a powerful upgrade, so you need to have some sort of gatekeeping. I understand why they did it. So the Eternity Cache is kind of tapped. You have to go out and find another key, come back, run it again, and then you can do the same thing. Okay, so I did want to take a second to talk about legendaries because this is a big point of contention, I would say, between a lot of people. So I love the system. I really like the system they have in place. I feel like the cache is an awesome idea, kind of tucked away deep in the dungeon. I like the story kind of wrapped around it. The way it works is just well done. But with that being said, legendaries feel so average to me. So when you think of anything that's legendary, you think of why that thing is legendary. Is it an effect, a story, an ability? Like what? What made it legendary? So the issue here is that legendaries in their current form are just roided up stat sticks, and that's very disappointing. Now, I understand the power that can come with them and the build variety that they can unlock, but plus 300% physical damage doesn't carry the same charisma as an effect like Warpath now detonates enemies that are killed with this ability, and then those explosions apply spreading flames. See, there's a difference in tone between those two things. So anyway, I just wanted to voice some concerns. Now, I put some solutions and talk about this a little bit more at length in my previous video on legendaries, so feel free to check that out. But I want to keep things moving, and let's talk about some crafting changes. So last Epoch's crafting system is closer to an enchanting system. Now, I know that's kind of mincing words, but to me, a craft is where you take raw materials and you create something. Now, I say this because when I talk about last Epoch and I mention it has crafting, that's one of the very first things I hear. So if this is your very first impression of last Epoch, just go in with that clarification. It's closer to enchanting than crafting, so don't look for like rare materials or raw materials or anything like that. Okay, so last Epoch has completely overhauled their crafting system. So before, you would take an item and just, kind of apply affixes to it. And then there was a chance that it could fracture, which would result in that item either being unable to be crafted upon, or even worse, it could lose some of its affixes. And really at that point, it just became useless or pointless. So you just broke it down and moved on. Now, the devs decided this was not a great system, and they opted for a more deterministic way of applying affixes. So now, instead of having a random chance at your item breaking, you instead have forging potential that randomly rolls on gear. Now, this forging potential will show how much crafting you can do to a certain item. And as you apply affixes, you'll lose a random amount of that potential all the way down to 0, which at that point you can no longer craft on it. Now, there are ways to kind of avoid this. You can have something like a glyph of hope, which will give you a chance to not consume any potential when you craft onto it. So, for instance, let's go through a scenario. If I have a sword that has 35 forging potential, and I apply a melee damage affix, let's say it drops by 8. So now I have 28 potential. And then I increase the melee damage and it consumes 5. And then I apply a glyph of hope, and I'm able to upgrade it 2 more times at no cost. And then I apply something different, and it goes down by 4, and then 8 again, all the way down to 0. Now, I, for one, really like the new system because it allows me to understand exactly what I can and cannot do during a craft, and because of that, I can make better decisions. I don't have to worry about a random fracture nuking my item and being scared to craft on my item. I know that, okay, here's my meter, here's all of the stuff I have in my bucket. I'm going to apply and really kind of prioritize these particular stats, make sure that all of those are topped off, and then I'll add on any additional stats that I possibly can. So that's just one of the kind of different ways of thinking about it. And I know a lot of people are really struggling with the new crafting system because maybe they had really good luck before and they didn't fracture so many items. I just feel like the fracturing and the RNG and all that stuff, it really put crafting on the back burner for me. And I would look for gear that didn't really need to be crafted on too much rather than sitting there and going, okay, do I want to try to do this? Oh, now my item fractured. Oh, it was a major fracture. So now, all of that effort and work that I put in to this item is now lost. So there's just a lot that kind of plays into it. And overall, I think these crafting changes are they're for the better, right? And if you're someone who really loved the old system, then it might take a little getting used to. But if you're someone who really didn't like the way the crafting worked in the past, this is a great system to jump in and start really understanding the way crafting works in last Epoch. Okay, so last but not least, I want to talk about the new Druid forms because, again, these are a big ticket item on this update. So let's go ahead, let's start with the Werebear. So the Werebear is just pure chaos. I mean, you have a rampage skill that just rolls through stuff. It runs things over. It's like Optimus Prime, Semi-Truck Edition, just smoking stuff. So you have Maul, which is like a leap smash type of skill. You can Roar, which pushes enemies back and stuns them. You have a basic kind of swipe skill to clean up whatever is left over. And then this version of the Werebear just feels like a tank. The thing is extremely fun to play, and because you can steamroll through groups of enemies so quickly, it almost feels like cheating sometimes. So then we have the Spriggan, which we had in the past, right? But this new version is just much, much better. It's all about ranged combat, and the Spriggan can summon up vines, and these vines can help lock down enemies and attack them, and really kind of deal some pretty significant damage. Now, players have even figured out how to box enemies or bosses into a corner with these vines, and this will probably be fixed soon, but right now it's fun to go out and do. He can also summon a healing totem to heal yourself and allies. He can summon a thorn shield, which will reflect damage back, and once it expires, it'll send out a burst of damage to nearby enemies. And then lastly, the Spriggan's basic attack is called Spirit Thorns. These work a lot like Ice Thorns. They're kind of like basically just homing missiles, and they'll seek out enemies, deal some significant damage, and overall the Spriggan just feels like it has an identity now. You know, it's a good range DPS and support character. It feels closer to the old WoW Druid, where you could go tree form, all that fun stuff. It just feels like it has an identity, which I really like. Now, last up is the latest addition. This one's just crazy, guys. This one is literally crazy because of how fun it is and how much damage you can pump out in such a very short period of time. That's the Swarm Blade. Now, this is like a giant locust thing, right? It has blades for arms, and it works very similar to the Rogue. But the difference here is that you can summon totems and do some pretty cool stuff. So the first skill is called Summon Hive, which drops a totem that will summon these locusts that will then attack enemies, and you can have 2 of these at a time. And then next you have Dive. Dive will attack everything in a short path in front of you, slashing, tearing things apart. And then next we have Swarm Strike. This is a really cool skill. It's a 2-parter. So first you're going to unleash a huge AoE slash, hitting everything around you. Then you're going to gather up any locusts from your summoned hives and then consume them to create an aura around yourself that will deal damage over time to anything close, which is just such a cool skill. I love kind of the combo and the way these things interact with each other. Now, lastly, the basic attack is called Arm Slash, and this deals decent damage and a cleave in front of you. So this form has already become a crowd favorite, right? People are like, oh man, Swarmblade, you got to get a Swarmblade build going. And it just performs so well. It's fun to use, it's snappy, it's quick, you can do a good amount of damage with pretty much little effort. So love the Swarmblade. Now the cool thing here is that all of these Druid forms, they work with the Druid. So all of the skills will pull from different trees. For instance, the Werebear's Swipe skill will pull from your Swipe tree. The Arm Slash ability for the Swarmblade will both pull from your Serpent Strike, but also add on to your Serpent Strike. So there's a lot of really cool stuff that plays into this. So when you're not in a different form, you're still getting a lot of benefits from those forms. So it makes them not completely useless. You know, it's not like an on-off switch where, okay, it's on, I get everything that's really cool about this form, but once I run out of rage, then, you know, it switches off. Now suddenly I don't get any of the benefits there and I feel weak. That's not the case, which I really, really like. Okay, so let's keep things moving here. And let's talk about some impressions. So overall, I think Eternal Legends is another great step in the right direction for Last Epoch and for 11th Hour Games. I mean, this game, guys, it went from this really small indie hack and slash game, you know, with just, hey, let's just put a game together. It'd be really fun if it kind of resembled a little bit of Path of Exile and a little bit of Diablo 2. It'd just be really cool if we could do that. It went from a small dream to something incredible with huge aspirations of being a juggernaut in the hack and slash action RPG market, which is really cool. So it's fun to, one, have been along for the ride, but two, to see what it started off as and what it's become today. So every time there's an update, right, I just get really excited because I know they're building something better than what we had before. You can see this with their crafting update, the Druid Changes, the new visuals, the models, the new dungeon, all of that. Now, with all that being said, right, they're still not immune to criticism. And I am still a little disappointed with the legendary system, right? Hopefully they can add something in there to make things a bit more interesting because right now, I gotta be honest, I was very much looking forward to legendaries. Very much looking forward to it. I thought it'd be something really cool and unique. Maybe even strapping like 2 effects onto a piece of gear and just making it completely out of this world. But instead, it just is a stat stick, and I'm like, man, I was really hoping we'd see something different. But maybe they can add something in the future. Who knows? But right now, I think the next big update needs to be multiplayer. The fans want it, and I know Last Epoch is really hammering this. They're really making sure the mode is polished, it works well, the optimization is there, and everything is going to be firing on all cylinders. And I think that's a great mindset to have. But we also need to consider, at what point is multiplayer good enough to release to public? And we don't want to overwork the situation. We don't want to, strive to push for that 100%, because there's going to be issues with that, and it's going to take forever, and you might not even reach 100%. But either way, I'm very excited for it. I can't wait to see what they come up with next. Hopefully we'll have a little bit more clarity towards the beginning of the year in 2022 as to what we can expect to see from Last Epoch throughout the year. And another thing, if you do not have Last Epoch yet, but would like to look into it, definitely consider checking out my game store and looking at Last Epoch there. There's typically quite a few discounts that happen, so links in the description below. But as always, thank you so much, everybody, for watching. I really appreciate it, and I will see you all on the next one.
Sound off one and all that